here, this is a mountain called Mount Moriah, and this is the summit of the mountain. Right here we have the Kidron Valley. Then we have another valley that drains off on the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount called simply the valley. And before the current Temple Mount was built, you had a rise up right here of the northwest corner. Now, so there was a kind of a higher summit than the summit here. Now, when we're going to the time of Herod the Great, and we're going to look at how he expanded this and created the Temple Mount that is today. So first of all, he chopped off this high rise here. This is typically here. He chopped it off, and then he also extended the southern part. Like the first temple was sitting pretty much on the summit of Mount Moriah, and what Herod did when he came along, the second temple had already been built, but it needed renovation, and so he extended this whole southern part to create this massive platform, which is 35 acres, 1/6 the size of the old city. There is some statistic about football fields, but I don't know anything about football, sorry to say, so I can't give you that statistic. Okay, so then on that, of course, was already resting the temple in the area of Moriah, something like this. And so that's what we see today. Not the temple, of course, but we see the Temple Mount. This whole thing was destroyed in 70 AD, and along came other structures. Where is it? Okay. Along came this other structure. Built. It was begun in the late 7th century by the Muslims. They were given. They were actually given the Temple Mount by the Bishop of Jerusalem, Sophronius, in 638 when he came in, because in the Byzantine Church they believed that God was finished with the Jews and the temple was cursed, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And so when Caliph Omar came into the city of Jerusalem, Sophronius, instead of wanting to fight off the Muslims, he handed him the keys to the city. That was the first thing. The second thing was he invited him to pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which we'll see on Tuesday. And Omar said, no, I'll pray outside. And so right next to the church is this Mosque of Omar. Then the third thing he did was he took him on a tour of Jerusalem, and they came up here on the Temple Mount. And Sophronius said, hey, you could pray up here. You know, we're not using this. So he came over to this area right here, and he prayed. He took rubble and sort of created a makeshift sort of structure facing Mecca, and he prayed there, and that became the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest site in Islam. That was followed by this shrine called the Dome of the Rock, which was begun in the late 600s AD, finished in the early 700s, around 740. And so this was like a pilgrimage shrine. So a lot of people get mistaken and they think this is a church. This is not a church. Later on, when the Crusaders were occupying Jerusalem for between 1099 and 1187, they had made this into a church called the Temple of Solomon. And they made the Al-Aqsa Mosque into the Temple of the Lord. So they were using the mosques, but then when they were thrown out of the country by the Muslims in 1187, the whole thing changed. And then you see the structures that we see there today. These are from that time period or a little later, and of course they've been renovated and a lot of other things have happened. Now we get up to this a period called the Mameluke period, which begins at 1260 AD and runs until 1516. And what happens is the Mamelukes, they were not they did not want the Crusaders back into the country, so they pretty much let the seaports all go to ruin. And there was no incoming traffic from the west. But what was going on was there was a lot of traffic between Cairo and Damascus and Jerusalem. And so they built a lot of roads, and they built a lot of bridges, and they developed the Pony Express, the mail delivery. They also developed the game of polo, and they also built the quarter that we're going to be walking under, which is the Muslim quarter today. And so we're going to be walking through storerooms that they built. This is basically the Middle Ages of Jerusalem. And in that time period, there was also some activity by the Catholic Church to at least grab a hold of as many sites, Christian sites, as possible. And so the Franciscans were coming in and making base camp in various places. And it was at this time that the Franciscans developed a devotional way that they called the Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrows. This is not the authentic way that Jesus walked with the cross. This was designed by the Franciscans in the Mameluke period under a very strict parameters because they were under Islamic rule. They developed this route that would eventually arrive at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And we're going to do that on Tuesday, but we're going to kind of do it a little differently than as standardly done. Wall. Okay, this is the western wall of the Temple Mount. This is the northwest corner over here. So this whole site deals with this area here, and then we go all along here, and then we come out on the Via Dolorosa. So the little star is where we're currently standing, and then we're going to be walking under the Mameluke period houses of the Muslim quarter. We're going to be walking through their storerooms. And then we're going to come over to the edge over here, and we're going to look at some of the structure that was here that Herod had built. And earlier, there was an aqueduct coming from south of Bethlehem, a 68-kilometer long aqueduct that brought fresh water onto the Temple Mount in the time of Jesus, and it ran along a bridge that came right up here, and it came onto the Temple Mount. So you're going to see a part of that bridge, and then we're going to come over here and see a model, and then we're going to be walking along the western wall, and I'm going to show you a few more things, and then we're going to walk through a water channel that was built by the Hasmoneans, Hasmonean period 167 until 63. So they were, of course, they were building and doing a few renovations here and there in Jerusalem in their particular time period. Okay, throw all the opposition out, which were the Jewish people at the time, and deport them out of Jerusalem and the former province of Judah or Judea, and get them out of here and rebuild the whole city, which he did, and it was finished in around 135 AD. So they're starting to discover there's a whole huge bathhouse from that period that they've just uncovered in this area. There's a lot of excavation going down underneath here. UNESCO gets to inspect it every year to make sure that we're not violating any property laws or destabilizing any structures. Okay? All right.
Is some of the excavation underneath going that way towards?
No, there's nothing going underneath the Temple Mount. There is one doorway that used to have a synagogue there, and it was after 67 the Muslims raised Cain about that, and so they just cemented it up. I'll show you where it is.
Hey.
How old are the tunnels? Well, the excavation has been going on since 1967 when Jerusalem came back under Israeli control after 1900 years. They started excavating everywhere they could in the old city. And so the tunnels are since 1967. A set of arches that was the bridge, the aqueduct that came to the Temple Mount. Remember the aqueduct in Caesarea where you had, I mentioned Herod built one part of the aqueduct and Hadrian built the other? Well, the same thing is here. We've got the Hadrian Arch and we've got the Herodian Arch. Right here we have a ritual immersion bath, a mikvah, and it's probably dated to the, there's a lot of material here from Hasmonean, so that it was here since Hasmonean period. That's going back BC. Over down here is a very interesting immersion pool. They use this for immersion for some like bar mitzvahs and things. That is an underground water supply that they don't even know the source of it. And it's a spring.
It's like pollution.
So it's not sewage, it's spring. Okay. Welcome to the Hall of Errors. And then these are all the different periods seen all together that they have been uncovering. And then we go into the beginning, and let us go to First Temple period. Now that, you know what First Temple period is? That's like from Solomon, 900 and I think 85, if I'm not mistaken, to 586. Okay? That's from the time of the First Temple. Okay? Then we move on forward in time to 167 BC to a cistern, a Hasmonean cistern. Okay? Pretty amazing, isn't it? Then we come to the time of Herod, and they found a wall. This wall is from the time of Herod. And then we come into the Roman period, which is post-Herod, bringing us to the time of Aelia Capitolina. That was 135 AD. And then we come into the Muslim period. And you see this particular arch right here. That's the Muslim period. And that's probably around 8th, 9th century AD. And then we come to the Crusader period, which is going to take us to the 11th century. So you look up into the corner there. All right. And then we come to our dear friends, the Mamelukes, 1260. So there is one of their archways in their storage rooms. And then they're going to give you a cross section. That is, I don't, see they say here in Hebrew. Oh, Timuch, okay. That is a supporting arch. They put that in, that's modern. So that's to hold the whole archaeological dig up. Okay? So then it extends over here, it's 40 feet long. 40 feet long. And it's about 13 feet high and about 30 feet thick.
Wow.
And weighs around 600 and something tons. So when we're talking about heavy stones called ashlars, I'm not kidding. And that is what's holding the whole Temple Mount up for the last 2,000 years. Through all the earthquakes and through everything, it has remained stable. Yeah?
Do we have any idea how they put that thing in place?
Yes. They did it by rolling it on logs and then oxen pulling it using pulleys in the opposite direction. There's maybe the little film works, and then I'll show you.
Okay.
Okay? And then they crowbar it into place. They bring it up a ramp, and then they crowbarred it into place. tunnel. Take a look at the stones. These are like really well-cut stones. From time to time you'll see a shaft, and you'll see all kinds of things that will gather up in the room, which is an open-air street. So the next big room, we're going to stop and then we're going to talk. Tradition today, Jewish tradition today, the closest place to the Holy of Holies, okay? Where the Holy of Holies used to be. And so that's become really a holy place for these women. It's kind of a women's prayer area. The men pray over under Wilson's Arch, but the women pray there. So because we're the first group into the Western Wall Tunnel for the new week, they're in there, you know, we got to see all those people praying. So this tunnel that we just walked under is simply a shaft that was excavated underneath the Mamaluke quarter in order to continue to observe and see what's going on with the Temple Mount encasement wall. Not the temple itself, but the Temple Mount wall. Now when they get to this point, you see the bedrock here. They actually create ashlars. If you look above here, they create ashlars that look like they're completely cut out of stone, but it's only the facade. They're just to carry on the whole decor and the look. Why? Because actually, and you're standing now on paving stones of the open-air street. And there was an open-air street that went from the southwest corner of the Temple Mount right on up to the Hasmonean water channel. And so here we are standing on the open-air street. So just imagine Jesus and his disciples, because they spent a lot of time just walking around Jerusalem, that this would be one of the places where they would be walking. Now they have yet to go westward with the excavation between these two columns, but these two columns indicate that there was a portico, and possibly there's an east-west street going on here that could be excavated, and there's a real possibility in the future that they will open up and go that way with the excavation.
They just carefully undoing this all the way.
Yeah, very carefully. They don't use jackhammers or any such things. They're very careful with the chisels